You're listening to Potty Mouth Radio, the home of movies, music, television, and comedy.
And now, the hunt for the perfect album.
Hello, listeners, and welcome back to the Hunt for the Perfect Album with Billy and Dave as we hunt for the perfect album, as the label says on the tin. And this week, we're looking at an album that Dave has thrust upon me. Would you like to tell the people what I'm listening to this week, mate?
It's an album that I'm astonished you've never heard before, but you are a very, very young spring chicken, barely in the prime of your life. I gave you The Doors by The Doors from 1967, I want to say.
Yes, only a measly, 21 years before my date of birth.
It's nothing.
So, tell us about your history with this album and when you first listened to it.
All right. I hit high school with almost zero musical knowledge or appreciation. I'm an only child. I didn't have older siblings. I was a bit of a nerd, so I wasn't hanging out with a whole bunch of people absorbing stuff from their older siblings. So my musical knowledge was limited pre-high school to sort of slightly older children of my parents' work friends that I interacted with. So I had one or two albums that I'd been exposed to and owned on cassette tape or vinyl. I had ABBA by ABBA. I had Shabu Shabar by In Excess. I had 1098, which I've given you previously, by Midnight Oil.
Yeah.
That was kind of the extent of my entire musical knowledge. And I hit high school, and that first year in what would have been mid-80s was kind of this baptism by fire where I was suddenly exposed through numerous friends to all sorts of things. And one of those friends introduced me to The Doors, and The Doors have ever since then been one of my favorite bands of all time. I know Jim Morrison's a bit of a kind of florid wanker, and he's a little bit poetic, but on the flip side, I think he's genuinely a fucking good poet, and I think he's an amazing lyricist.
Yeah.
So, yes, bit of a wanker in some senses, but genuinely talented, or the band wouldn't have done what they did. Ray Manzarek is an amazing keyboardist, an amazing composer. Robbie Krieger is an amazing guitarist. Densmore's an amazing drummer. I think as a band, they are one of the best of that kind of late 60s counterculture / flower power, whatever you want to call it, period. And I genuinely don't think they've got a bad track in their entire discography. And I think as far as debut albums go, it's one of the biggest kind of explosions on the scene, if you like, that any band has ever had.
100%. So, yes, I had not listened to this album as an album from start to finish. I was surprised by how many tracks on the album I knew. Obviously, the first one is a big one. But it was definitely more than just that. Even if it was like, oh yeah, I recognize this riff, for example. So, I mean, let's get straight into it then. So, usually when I listen to these albums, I do it when I'm in the car. This week, I had forgotten to listen to it, and I didn't do that much commuting this week. Like, week before Christmas, I was just really, really busy. So when I remembered to listen to this, I actually did it what I think is the right way. I just sat down, doing absolutely nothing, and just put this album on and listened. I wasn't reading. I was just sitting and listening.
We chased our pleasures here, dug our treasures there. But can you still recall the time we cried? Bring on through to the other side. Bring on through to the other side.
Yeah, and I've said this before. I think I said it about Midnight Oil as well. When artists, even artists who are very big, and you know a lot about them, it's very interesting when they surprise you still. And I got to say, I was a bit surprised by this album, and I was surprised by that title track. I've heard that track so many times. My memory of it was that it was a lot rockier than it was. I was, I think, lumping the Doors in more with kind of the metal bands of the day, like Led Zeppelin and stuff like that.
Sort of Deep Purple, that sort of thing.
Deep Purple. This is not really that style of music at all. It's kind of
it's much more akin to Jefferson's Airplane or
yes.
Jefferson Airplane or that sort of psychedelic San Francisco sound almost.
Yeah. Or honestly, even
although they are very LA.
Yes, or honestly, even part of it is kind of Beatles-ish, more in like not so much in the style, but in the arrangements and compositions. You know, like there's a lot of keys in that track, for example, which took me by surprise.
It's through most of their stuff because the primary lyricist is obviously Jim Morrison. The primary composer for all of their stuff is Ray Manzarek, who is the keyboardist. So the keyboards are always front and center in almost every track.
Yeah.
Well, the clock says it's time to close now. I guess I better go now.
You can hear that in that track too, as well. Track 2, how the guitar is prominent, but the guitar is following the keys. It's very similar to how in most bands, bass leads the way and everything kind of follows the bass and drums. Whereas here, it's very keyboard led, which is just something I wasn't expecting. And it is something that I really enjoyed. I really liked this album from start to finish. There were absolutely no tracks that I wanted to skip. I mean, yeah, I liked it. I think that it works more as an album. There's not that many songs on here that I can see myself adding into a playlist. But I think sitting down and listening to this album from top to tail is a great way to experience it. I'm very curious to hear what your favorite track is.
Kind of give you more of a kind of an appreciation of the band as a whole to go and check out their other stuff, because obviously there are certain big hits that people know from the Doors, but unless you are a fan and have delved into the rest of their discography, most of their tracks most people have probably never heard. And I think there's a lot of variation. There's a lot of different. There's some very poppy songs. There's
Yeah. It surprised me a lot, and it definitely made me want to listen to more because, like you say, I thought I knew the Doors, or like I had never listened to them extensively, but I was like, I've heard some of their stuff in the same way that most people would say they know the Beatles, even if they're not Beatles fans.
Exactly. And then there's obviously lesser known tracks.
Yes. And I think in the most part, you actually can say that about the Beatles. I don't think the Beatles also can be quite eclectic in their style, but I think it's a lot easier to say, oh, I know the Beatles. The Doors, this really surprised me. Like, even the tracks that I knew surprised me. My favorite, I've got a couple of favorites.
I'm so intrigued to know what this is.
The first one that really struck me was 20th Century Fox.
Well, she's fashionably lean, and she's fashionably late. She'll never rank a scene. She'll never break a day. But she's no drag, just watch the way she walks. She's a 20th Century Fox.
I love it musically, and lyrically, this is going to sound like a very strange pull. It almost felt a bit Jim Croce-ish to me in its songwriting structure. That kind of telling a story of a person.
I can actually see that.
Yeah, it's something that Jim Croce
I'm a huge Jim fan, and so knowing most of. Well, I'm gonna fucking. I know all his songs.
Same. I
can actually see that.
Yeah.
I can see that.
Yeah. So I actually really, really enjoyed that song. And the one after that, Alabama song, Whiskey Song, as soon as I saw the title, I was like, yeah, I get the feeling I'm going to like that song. And I did.
One of the perennial live tracks for the band.
Well, show me the way to the next whiskey bar. Oh, don't ask why. Oh, don't ask why. Show me the way to the next whiskey bar. Oh, don't ask why. Oh, don't ask why. For if
Do you know who I'm going to say that sounds like? I bet you can guess.
No.
That's very Tom Waits-ish in its composition.
I almost said Tom Waits, and I thought, no, it doesn't really. But okay, yeah, it does make sense. That song's actually not. It's one of the very few non-original songs that the Doors did.
Really? Yeah, right.
Yeah, it's actually goes back to Bertolt Brecht and Kurt Weill. I'm not sure if it's from. I'm assuming it's from one of their musicals. I've never looked into it, but
Yeah.
I do know it is that the lyrics, etc., is taken from Bertolt Brecht.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
right.
yeah, but it's one of their perennial live tracks. Obviously, everything about it screams the Doors. It's about alcohol. Hello, Jim Morrison. It all kind of works, but it's one that it does. It really comes alive in their live shows.
Yeah. Yeah. A bit unrelated, but speaking of, cover songs you didn't know were cover songs, a listener today linked me to a documentary. I think it was probably off the back of our best teen movies where I spoke, much about John Hughes. Linked me to a documentary about Simple Minds' recording of Don't You Forget About Me, which they did not write, which I didn't know that.
No,
and they did
no. They were engaged as almost kind of like a house band, really.
Yeah.
It was written by what's the name that did the soundtrack, I think.
Yeah, and they did not want to record it because they were like, no, we record our own music. And even to this day, they kind of shun that track. So, yeah, it was.
Yeah, they'd much rather do fucking Live and Kicking or Glittering Prize or...
Yeah.
I'm struggling to think of more Simple Minds songs.
Yeah. And then
goes to say just how iconic that song is.
After this, we get Light My Fire, which is another track that I feel like is a much more well-known one.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, it's one of their biggest.
You know that it would be untrue. You know that I would be a liar if I was to say to you, girl, we couldn't get much higher. Come on, baby, light my fire. Come on, baby, light my fire.
And I have to ask, the next track, Backdoor Man, that's just about a dude who loves booties, right? That's just about a guy who wants to punch you in the back door. I almost couldn't stop laughing listening to that song because I was like, clearly that's Jim Morrison just wanted to get it in the brown.
Look, I did say that Alabama Song was their only cover. It's not. I mean, this is an old traditional Southern US song. I know Willie. I think it was written by Willie Dixon. I'm not 100% sure.
Guy with two names that are names
there is
for dicks.
There's a famous version. Howlin' Wolf did a famous version.
Yeah.
Which is the one that I'm aware of. I'm prepared to bet that it's not about ass sex. But I'm not. I don't want to speak for the songwriters. Who's to say?
No, go ahead, speak for them. It's about butt fucking. So I did like this whole album, but I feel like the first half is stronger for me than the back half. I feel like from Backdoor Man, the next three tracks, I Looked at You, End of the Night, and Take It As It Comes, I don't have as strong memories of. Like I
Right.
don't know that I could differentiate those three. I'm really curious. What is your favorite track from this album?
The End, 100%. It's my favorite Doors song,
Oh.
completely.
Yeah, nice. Mine too. The second we got to that
Oh,
track,
good. Yeah.
and you start with that beautiful guitar, and it's
this song's a fucking masterpiece.
and it's so different to the rest of the album because everything else has been so keys led, and then here you just go straight into that guitar solo, and it's so
That intro that we all know from Apocalypse Now.
Yeah.
But I mean, fucking hell, it is just amazing.
This is the end, beautiful friend. This is the end, my only friend. The end of our elaborate plans. The end.
yeah, the best song on this album for me, and one of the best songs ever written. I love that track. It's fantastic. It's worth listening to this
Amazing.
album just for that track. But I did like the entire album. I gotta say, it's amazing. Given that The End is an 11-minute long song, it's pretty incredible that the entire album is only 44 minutes. Most of the songs move at a really quick pace, which I gotta say, for the 60s, 70s is not standard.
Well, it depends. There were a lot. This album, I think, is kind of symptomatic of a lot of albums at that time where you had a lot of bands in that sort of psychedelic era who were doing these great big long epic songs, but then they'd pepper in these short pop songs in between in order to get radio airplay. I assume.
true. Yeah.
So your likes of Jefferson Airplane, your likes of even the Who. You know, like the Who would do a Bubba O'Reilly, which is probably off the top of my head, and I'm probably wrong, but like 6-7 minutes long or whatever.
Yeah.
But the rest of the side, because it was all vinyl, the rest of that side would be short 2-minute songs, 2.5-minute songs.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, I'm super pleased that you like this album. It's far from my favorite Doors album, but
Okay.
I think it's a good kind of one to give you because it's got my favorite Doors song on it,
Yeah.
but it's also, I think, it's a good snapshot because you've got kind of the poppy radio airplay stuff like Break On Through and End of the Night and then you've got some of their more, I don't know, like kind of thinky songs like Crystal Ship, which I think is another one of the best songs on the album, and then you've got obviously the likes of The End. I think it's a good kind of encapsulation of what they bring to the table in their early days.
Yeah.
And then, absolutely. The weird thing is, my introduction to the album was the 40th anniversary version, which had bonus tracks. So when I gave this to you, I thought it had a couple of tracks that it actually doesn't if you look at the original. So there's a track called Moonlight Drive, which is one of my favorite Doors songs that you didn't get because you looked at the actual original version, not the 40th anniversary. Threw it in as a bonus. So there's a cracking fucking song called Moonlight Drive that we're not talking about.
Yeah. No, because I'm a 7 out of 10, and like we said earlier, it did make me want to listen to more of the Doors. So I will go and check out some more of their stuff for sure.
Look, there's 3 other albums.
Yeah. Okay.
That are worth checking out. It's not a obviously they didn't go forever because Jim died in 70 whatever.
Yeah.
And the kind of last album after he died is, with the exception of 1 or 2 tracks, largely bollocks. So you're really looking at Morrison Hotel, Strange Days, and Waiting for the Sun.
Yeah.
Those are the albums to check out. All 3 of them are amazing.
Nice.
This is pound for pound, one of the best bands in history in terms of
Nice.
good songs to dud songs.
Yeah.
If you want to look at it that way. So
Yeah, big fan.
definitely. Yeah, go check those out. I'm not going to give them to you in this show because I think they're not different enough from this first one. It's not.
Yeah.
It's not like Charlie Bliss, where album 1 and album 2 are totally different kind of genres.
Yeah. Yeah.
But 100% check them out. They're all great. They all have amazing songs.
All right. Well, next week I'm going to go real different. I'm going to go quite recent. I want to say 2016, 2017 maybe. And I'm going to give you a 4-track EP.
Ooh, different.
By a female-led band
Nice.
out of the States called Beach Bunny.
Yeah.
Beach Bunny. I'm going to give you their debut EP, Prom Queen. I'm very curious to see how you react to that one. I'm not convinced that you'll love it. But it's only 4 tracks, and I really like all of them. I'm just curious to get your take on it and how you feel about it. So
4 tracks, and you don't hate any of them, and it fits the bill.
Yes. All right. Well, thank you.
I've never heard of Beach Bunny, so not even in passing. So I'll see how I go.
Thank you very much, everybody, for listening to this. If you're listening to this on the main feed, then you can head over to Patreon and listen to another 6 months worth of these episodes. You're now listening to this well after we've recorded it.
welcome to the future.
But thank you all for joining us on this beautiful evening, and we'll catch you next week.
Farewell.